Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to my channel. I am a concept artist, comic artist, illustrator, and on this channel I like to go through and I like to look at the stuff that really inspires me and share it with people that come across my videos. And on this video we're going to be looking at the concept art design of Bioshock Infinite, which is one of my favorite games as far as design. I wasn't the biggest fan of the game itself, but the design, and in particular the design of the enemies, I thought was really creative and really unique. And so this video is the first in a series of videos that's going to be looking at different elements of design of the concept art of the world of Bioshock Infinite. In this episode, we're going to be looking at just a few pieces of the enemies, and towards the end, we're going to look at a couple of pieces that were actually cut content. So that's kind of a little bit of a teaser for you. For people that are not new to this channel and that have seen some of my videos before, you'll know my illustration masterclass videos, which you can find on this channel. In those videos, I usually go through and I pick one specific artist, and then I break down their style and I break down the design principles that they're using as a form of like a tutorial, because I found that those are the best ways, that's actually the best way to learn. So with this one, it's more about the art design of an entire world. So we will be looking at multiple artists. I don't have the artists' names or their information at the moment. If I end up adding it, it'll be in the description box below. If you know the artist, or if you're an artist that worked on this game and you'd like to be credited, then please make a comment in the description box and I'll make sure to add your social media links to the description box, because I want to make sure that people get the credit they deserve for this. Because the concept designs in this game are amazing. So this first one we're looking at are the Boys of Silence. And what we're looking at right now is like this orthographic breakdown of what the characters would look like, as well as some of the gestures. We see a breakdown in terms of just little notes here, right? Uh, this character wears a school uniform. They're children from an orphanage, which is really interesting because it doesn't really. I just pulled these off of offline, so it doesn't really give any background as to why it is that these children have this metallic thing put on their head. But it's quite creepy and very scary. But I love the design of it because if you play the game, you know that these guys are basically like alarms. That whenever it is that you approach, they let out this scream, and or it's actually a sonic attack that they let out of their mouth right here, and it basically alerts all the other enemies to your presence. And here we have some other breakdowns. We have some other notes. Mouth works like bamboo fountain. So you can kind of imagine that. He's got like a side view of it. So this is an example of actual concept artwork, right? Because he's showing the materials that this object would be made of and the overall design of it. And he's given examples of what it would look like from one angle or the next. So let's go ahead and let's look at another one. Yeah, so there was a concept that they had earlier on in the game, which I believe they ditched it in favor of maybe some other characters, but it was this idea of like a mad toy maker, a guy who makes all these animatronic toys that have gone like renegade. And I'm not exactly sure how the idea was implemented, what that character did in the final game, but you can see that idea is carried through in all of the designs of these different animatronic uh, character designs. And I really appreciate it because you can see some interesting details and interesting decisions in the way it is that they decided to design these characters, right? Um, you know, I talk a lot about repeating shapes in my illustration masterclass tutorials. And you can see these same repeating shapes here. You can see small circles, and then you can see the big circles of the eye, of the socket of the eye, as well as the eyeball itself, as well as the side piece here. You know, even on the side of the eye, or on the side of the head, we have this circle, and then it's got several circles inside of it, right? And then we have circles up here. So it's a good way to keep the design organized by having lots of different elements. You know, you take a circle shape, and then you can make it at varying sizes in order to create levels of detail that make it feel organized, but it gives a sense of design at the same time. And you can tell they're looking at, like, you know, 1930s animatronics and like early forms of robots and how it is that how they might operate, right? And then you've got this back panel illustrated here. You know, like maybe you have to get behind this auto patriot and shoot him in the back in order to disable him. This George Washington one is just really crazy to me that they made this thing. I mean, for one thing, the face looks like a porcelain doll. You know, it looks like a haunted porcelain doll. And I love like all the details that they have here. Um, well, it's actually rubber. It says cracked rubber face, puckered rubber around eye socket, missing eye, blinking eyelid, cracks spider but around puppet-like talking mouth. And then we can see underneath it. You know, again, this is another example of like an orthographic breakdown that a concept artist would do. You know, you're gonna do various angles of a particular piece. You know, you might have a sketch like this, and then more of like a detailed breakdown, and then a breakdown of actually how the head works and what it looks like underneath. And then you've got this George Washington with these American flag wings. It's so crazy looking. And then even a breakdown of how things would work inside the head, right? We're getting closer to the cut content, so stick around for that. These are some NPCs. You know, again, you could go and you could cross-reference a lot of artists that they looked at. You could probably put somebody like J.C. Linedecker was probably somebody that they were looking at. They were looking at a lot of Golden Age illustrators. Norman Rockwell was probably another artist that they were looking at. And I think it's really interesting and really smart that they did that, because you have these archetypes from that time period. You have the mechanic and the blacksmith and the clown and the guy who works at the fair, uh, the oil tycoon. You have all these different archetypes that they are able to express and explore different ideas with. And so you can see the artist exploring different ways and different NPCs that you might encounter in the game here. This was one of the enemies in the game that you come across, the handyman. The design is really symmetrical, right? So you have a very symmetrical design, and there's a lot of, again, circular elements in the design. You see them all throughout here, right? You see it on the kneecaps, on the inside of the legs. You see them on the hands, even here, on the digits of the fingers. So they're like the joints of the fingers. And you see the same circular spherical shape here on the shoulders and the elbows, right? You see that here as well. We get a little bit of exposure on how the elbow works in terms of like the shapes, right? So this is an example of what it is that I mean. You have a big, medium, and small, and then we have this huge circle shape right here in the center that is holding the heart of the handyman, which is, of course, his weak spot, right? And then you could also say these are circular. This is circular. These are circular. This is circular here. So these are all design elements that they're incorporating, even little details on the cufflinks. You know, circular, circular. And so you can look at something like this and you can start to break down the design of it and start to understand, oh, okay, what they're doing is, you know, this character has a particular motif, which I would actually say is much more of like a square motif or maybe an upside down triangle because the shoulders feel very broad, right? So it's almost a shape like that. And then in order to create a sense of unity, but then also to create a sense of variety, they're using different shapes at different sizes in order to keep the character design consistent within itself, right? So this character designer probably thought of a character with these big broad shoulders and almost like a triangular upside down triangle kind of composition, because the shoulders are so much wider than the hips, right? And instead of incorporating that triangle throughout the rest of the character design, what it is that the character designer did was they incorporated a contrasting element that would make it more interesting, which is the circle, or the spherical shape. And that's partly to keep it consistent with all of the other character designs that we've seen so far that have had this circular shape to them. But they also serve dual purposes, right? Like we can see that this has a real purpose in the world because it's like a ball joint, right? And then these are almost like these these details on the hands, these joints. You know, they serve as joints of the finger that the fingers would move, but they also feel like rings on his finger, right? So it keeps with the aesthetic of this 1930s aesthetic, right? And then that same circle or spherical pattern is repeated throughout the piece in different ways. And these small little details on the cufflinks, these small little details on the shoes, right? On the jacket, we see them here. On the pant legs, we see them here, right? And you could also say that there's another contrasting element, which is that there's a triangle that's hidden here, right? So there's a triangle that goes along this rib cage. Like if I hide this, if we look at the rib cage, they point upwards towards the heart, right? So it's all about taking, you have a shape that you want to base the character off of. You can use that shape, such as a circle, but you want to use it in big, medium, and small variations in order to create the detail of the piece so that it feels like it is cohesive and has unity. While at the same time, you always want to have a contrasting element that draws your attention directly to where it is that you want your player to look, which would be the heart, right? And of course, there's also more contrasting elements here that's pulling our eye because we have the densest forms of color here in the center, which makes this read as a target, right? Um, but other than that, it's very symmetrical design. But then there's little details that they use in order to throw the symmetrical design off. Because if it's completely symmetrical, meaning both sides look exactly the same, then it can be kind of a boring design. But what it is that this character artist did was he kept both sides the same because the character design is an animatronic design, so it would make sense that it's completely symmetrical. But then it starts to add in detail to keep the interest there. So we see that the pants leg over here is more broken up on the left side. And then we see that the arm, uh, the the coat on the right, on the left arm, is broken up more. So we see more of this side, right? And it's not a coincidence that they tore up this part of the gene and then opened up this part of the arm. You can imagine if he put them on both sides, it might lose a little bit of the visual interest. And then, of course, we have, again, we go back onto this side and we have what? This very little detail, which is that his ear is cut in a little bit, right? And his head is tilted to the side. That was definitely intentional. You have these details that are basically right, left, right. Okay? So let's go ahead and let's get to this cut content that I know you're waiting for. So this was some of the toy maker stuff that got cut from the game. And I mean, it looks really, really cool. You know, again, you have these different elements that are symmetrical, and then you have elements that are asymmetrical. I believe these guys on the right, they were supposed to be like these guardians, like these tower guardians or something that are almost like alarm systems. Maybe they were like the boys of silence. You can see a similar idea with them because they have lights projecting out of the side of their head, right? So instead of the sound cones coming out, you have these light beams. So you can almost imagine that their head is like a lighthouse and that it's scanning the environment and then it can alert other enemies of your location. And then we see this this dial on their head. I guess would that be considered a sundial? I can't remember what you name this, right? But I could imagine that this would be pointing uh, the enemies to your location, depending on how it's oriented in the environment, which is really cool. It's a really clever idea, you know, and it keeps consistent with this idea of um, with like a crazy toy maker, right? And then we see over here on this side, if this is the crazy toy maker, you know, the the atmosphere that these pieces create is really cool. You know, like I love the way it is that the the skeleton of the armature of the animatronic is coming through in the ear here. I mean, it just looks really cool, right? And then, of course, like just by looking at them, you can see how the circular shapes are repeated throughout both of these designs. Like, look at the ears, or these sun or these lighthouse-like shapes right here, right? Or circular. Same thing here. You can see it on the chest, right? And then obviously it's over here as well. And again, we have those contrasting details, right? This is a design that if you were to draw this perfectly, as if like this was a brand new robot, then both sides would be symmetrical. And so the design wouldn't be that interesting. But what do? They break up the symmetry They create a symmetrical design and then break up elements of the symmetry, right? So he takes out this eye, and he drops this ear, and he puts a hat on its head tilted to this side. And then we see this is also broken up. This button is broken up, right? And then we have him carrying eggs on one side of him, right? So we got one more. I'm going to take a quick look at. Again, what do we see immediately? We see the same kind of circular patterns. This was another cut piece. I mean, it's really cool. I don't know the backstory of this, but what's interesting is that I feel like you can start to imagine a story based off of just this sketch or just this painting of him, right? But again, we see these different elements of circles throughout the whole piece. We see these little details along with big details, all organized with these circular kind of shapes, with these curvy kind of shapes, you could say. So we have these nice curves that go down, right? And then obviously we can see he's an enemy that somehow conjures up electricity. So anyways, guys, that's my take on some of the enemy NPC designs for Bioshock Infinite. Next, I'll be taking a look at some of the environments. Anyways, guys, thanks for checking me out. If you have any suggestions for games that you'd like for me to look at, then please drop a comment in the comment box below. And if you want to check out some of my work, I've got my website in the description box below. Thanks, guys, for watching. Take it easy.